I'm Beth Copeland. I'm the executive producer and inspiration.
Hello, my friends. Hello. Shalom. Shalom, Phil Blomberg. All right. I'm so glad to have all of you here. It feels a little bit like high holidays again, but maybe less or more celebratory. I'm not really sure which. For those who don't know me, I'm Rabbi Emily Barton. I'm the rabbi of the synagogue here, Tifereth Israel Synagogue. And we're very excited to present this film to you. This was really a labor of love of Jody Jacqueline, so I'm trying to figure out where she is, but she really, she was really passionate about this film. She brought to the National Women's League of Conservative Judaism conference last year, and she really wanted us to bring it to Des Moines, and she worked with me and Bob very tirelessly to make sure that it could happen. And especially in these crazy COVID times, it's a real blessing to have people in person and to be able to see a film together and to be able to discuss this particularly powerful film together. So what we're going to do tonight is there is a short 6-minute film that we're going to run first, which talks with a little bit of an intro of the making of the film and how it came to be, and also has some comments from people who weren't able to be here tonight. And then we're going to show the actual film, the Tattooed Torah, and then there will be time for a live Q&A with the executive producer, the director, the composer, and the other producer, yes. And thank you very much. I've been up for a long time. So anyway, without further ado, my friend Alex McConnell over here, who's with Digital Stew, who's our tech firm that we use to do all of our computer stuff at the synagogue, is going to start the first film. Thank you all.
Hi, I'm Beth Copeland. I'm the executive producer and inspiration behind the animated short, The Tattooed Torah, based on the book written by my mother, Marvel Ginsburg. My mom was an early childhood Jewish educator and felt very strongly that the young should be educated about the Holocaust. She wrote the Tattooed Torah.
Shabbos. I actually didn't watch the last bit because I was coming over here. So. Like I always say on Shabbat, I hope whoever you root for wins. It's safe for me, right? I didn't see what happened with the Iowa State game. I have no idea. They lost? It looked like they might.
Hi, I'm Beth Copeland. I'm the executive producer and inspiration behind the animated short, The Tattooed Torah, based on the book written by my mother, Marvel Ginsburg. My mom was an early childhood Jewish educator and felt very strongly that the young should be educated about the Holocaust. She wrote the Tattooed Torah, a children's book, over 36 years ago.
My name is Martin Lemmelman. I am the illustrator of both the book and the movie, The Tattooed Torah. In 1994, I was asked to create color illustrations for Marvel Ginsburg's wonderful children's book.
As she was passing, we started to discuss what more we could do with the book to give her hope. Shortly after she passed, I came up with the idea to make it into an animated short. Our son, who had often talked to his hubby about doing a project together, agreed to co-write the screenplay with Mark Bennett, and we were able to manifest this beautiful book channeling my mom's intentions into a 3-generational project.
My bubby and I were always very close, and one of the things that we always connected on was our love for writing. And so to take her book and to turn it into this wonderful animated film really felt like we were finally working on a significant project together. And to take the book and to work with director Mark Bennett and to transform it into a screenplay and then to hand that off to such a talented team of people has just felt incredibly special throughout the entire process.
Hi, I'm Mark Bennett. I'm the director and co-writer of the Tattooed Torah. I think Holocaust education is really important, especially for young children, because it's been 75 years since the Holocaust, and we still have genocide happening over and over and over again. So it's our goal with this film both to educate young children through stimulating this vital conversation and to inspire empathy and empathetic action to combat things like dehumanization that make genocide possible.
Hi, my name is Lisa Afras, and I'm the producer of the film, The Tattooed Torah. As the mother of a 9-year-old, I'm especially proud of this project because it's an age-appropriate and impactful film which can help educate children for decades to come. It's comforting to know that there's this rare opportunity to invite children into this conversation about the Holocaust at such a tender age.
Hello, I'm Ed Asher. I'm the narrator of the film, The Tattooed Torah. I'm so honored to be part of the passionate, dedicated team that spent years creating this multi-generational story based on Marvel Ginsburg's beloved children's book.
My name is Melinda Goldrich, and I'm one of the executive producers of The Tattooed Torah. When the project was brought to me, I was made aware of the fact that there's very little appropriate Holocaust education for young children. This film fills that void in a very palpable and beautiful way.
Hi, I'm Christian Robbins, and I help with the animation and compositing of the Tattooed Torah film. As the father of 2 young girls and coming from a Catholic upbringing, this story truly takes one of the saddest points of human history and tells it in a way that all people, regardless of age and religious background, can understand. It's a film everyone must see. So, needless to say, I was honored to be able to lend my expertise to the film. The amazing amount of work that Mark and Jeffrey Pittle had already put in the movie before I personally came on speaks volumes to the massive task of creating a 20-minute film from scratch. We truly hope that we help not only give Martin's illustrations, but Marvel's story the attention to detail and justice it deserved, which is what a story of this magnitude needs.
Hi everyone, my name is Daniel Alshay. I'm the composer who wrote the music to the Tattooed Torah. I think the Tattooed Torah is a very special and important film, especially these days with everything that's going on with racism, anti-Semitism around the world. And I really hope that families, adults, children, schools, temples have a chance to screen it, discuss it, and really enjoy it for many, many years to come.
I think hands down the most memorable part of this production was when I first heard Daniel Alshay's score for the film. Music has an amazing way of engaging you and bringing out the emotion in a project, and I think Daniel's score is just perfect for the film, and he did an extraordinary job, and we're all so grateful for his work.
There are so many beautiful scenes that I love in this movie, but I think perhaps the scene at the Westminster Synagogue in London had some form of a emotional core that kind of influenced the whole movie, and I hope I was able to do it justice with the music.
My hope and dream for the Tattooed Torah is that it be seen by as many kids and families as possible, and that it be distributed in as many languages and to as many cultures worldwide.
My hopes and dreams for this project are that we reach as many children around the world as possible. And we've been so fortunate to have so many amazing people come be a part of making that happen. We've had a tremendous response to the film at film festivals around the world, as well as many private screenings at museums, institutions, and schools.
Now, more than ever, it is essential that we are able to share and personalize stories like this for children so that they too may someday share them with their children, to increase understanding and to stem the tide of denial we've been seeing in recent years. Thank you so much.
Hi.
This is the story of a little tattooed Torah. It was always little, but not always tattooed. Many, many years ago, before you were born, the little Torah lived in a handsome wooden ark with an embroidered velvet curtain. Next to the little Torah stood several big Torahs, wearing soft velvet mantles of scarlet, purple, and blue. For thousands of years, the Torah has been the most precious possession of the Jewish people. It is a collection of handwritten laws and stories rolled up onto a big scroll. The Torah is cherished and loved and passed down from generation
to generation. Torahs come in many shapes and sizes. Some are tall and some are short. Some have silver crowns and look like kings and queens. Others have silver bells that make gentle jingling sounds when they are taken out of the ark on Shabbat mornings and other holidays. Shabbat after Shabbat, holiday after holiday, year after year, the little Torah was held by a proud child marching in the procession. There was one little boy who especially loved the little Torah. He always held it during the holidays alongside the grown-ups. The little boy's earliest memory was of his grandfather, whom he called Zaidi, the town scribe, finishing the little Torah in his workshop. There was so much joy in the community the day the little Torah was brought into the synagogue. All of the children fell in love with it, and the grown-ups did too. A few years later, the little boy was learning how to read from the little Torah for his bar mitzvah. A bar mitzvah is the celebration of a Jewish child growing up. He and his Zaidi were practicing together for weeks. All of a sudden, there was a loud pounding on the door. Scared by the noise, the little boy stopped reading. Nazi soldiers entered the synagogue and nailed a large sign on the wall, then slammed the door shut as they left. It was a sign announcing a curfew, which meant that all Jews had to be home by nighttime. Zaidi was concerned, but only smiled and told the little boy not to worry, and that this would all be over before his bar mitzvah. Then one day everything changed. There was a different kind of marching sound. It was not the sound of Jewish people marching into synagogue to pray. It was not the sound of people marching in the Torah service procession, singing Hebrew songs. It was loud, mean marching with loud, mean talk. An evil man named Adolf Hitler had started a war. His Nazi soldiers marched into Brno, Czechoslovakia, the little boy's town. They closed down all of the synagogues. They took all of the Torahs, mantles, and other religious items and loaded them onto trucks headed to the city of Prague. The Nazis forced the little boy, his Zaidi and father, out of their home, as they did with all the other Jewish people in the town. As they passed by the synagogue, the little boy froze. He saw a Nazi soldier throw the little Torah into the back of a truck. He thought, how could such a terrible thing happen to my little Torah? As the little boy waited in line to board another truck, he was scared. And imagined how scared the little Torah must have been when the Nazis came into the synagogue. The little boy wanted to hold the little Torah in his arms, to know where it was going, to know where he and his family were going. All the little boy had really known until then was that a war had started. But he didn't understand what that meant until the truck rolled out of Brno with his little Torah. A part of him and his family was gone. Many hours later, the truck stopped outside a warehouse near Prague. The workers were ordered to sort out many objects, including books like the ones the little boy's father would read at home. Menorahs, like the ones he lit with his Zaidi on Hanukkah. Kiddush cups, like the cup his Zaidi used to bless the wine on Friday nights. And Torahs, many, many hundreds of Torahs from all over Czechoslovakia. They assigned the little boy, his Zaidi, and his father to the group numbering of the Torahs. They were forced to tattoo a number onto each Torah, and then record that number in a large book along with the location from which each Torah came. The Torahs were tagged and then taken through a back door and into a dark room. Day after day, they tattooed and recorded more and more Torahs. The little boy was so angry at first. He thought, they have no right to tattoo a Torah. A Torah is the most precious possession of the Jewish people. But before long, he forgot about his anger as they numbered and recorded like a machine. Every day, the little boy saw Nazi soldiers march into the warehouse and deliver truckloads of Torahs and other religious items. By winter, the Nazis began taking workers out of the warehouse. The little boy's father was one of them. His aide said they were only relocating him to a different warehouse, and that they would see him again soon. They went back to work, but the little boy was worried. What could he do? They had taken his father, just like they had taken his little Torah. His aide was worried too, though he tried not to show it. But as he painted the next number on the Torah, his brush slipped and left a long streak of white paint along the roller as he tried to hold back his tears. War is tough. It is lonely and it is cold and you're hungry and thirsty all the time. It is hard to keep hope. But this was more than just a war. What they were forced to do in the warehouse was really terrible and made the little boy think about what was going on outside. Were the Nazis making his father and all the other people do things that were just as bad? Or even worse? And one day, as the little boy stood there, sorting through Torahs, something amazing happened. The little boy pulled another Torah from the stack, as he had done so many times before, but this time he felt his heart pounding in his chest. It felt familiar. He looked down, and in his hands he saw the unmistakable blue velvet mantle of the little Torah. He looked up at his Zadie, and their eyes met in disbelief. The mantle was dirty and torn, but the little boy had seen the Star of David pattern so many times and held this Torah so many times before. He knew it was the little Torah, and his Zadie knew it too. Tears welled up in her eyes. The little Torah had found them. One of the guards walked over and barked at them to keep working. Why are you moving so slowly? More shipments are on the way. Still! As the guard walked away, his Zadie looked at him. He told the little boy that no matter what happened, when the war ended, he had to find the little Torah again, just like it now found him. The little boy agreed. His Zadie wrote a quick note on a scrap of paper and tucked it inside the scroll. That way, when the little boy found it again, he would know for sure that this was the little Torah. His Zadie wrote the number 32804 on one of the rollers, and then wrote it down next to the name Brno in the catalog book. The little boy watched sadly as the little Torah was taken into the guarded back room, and the door slammed shut behind it. The little boy would never forget how he felt in that moment. The little Torah had found him, and he hoped that one day he would find the little Torah again. The months passed. Less and less Torahs and religious items came into the warehouse, and so the Nazis took more and more workers away. His Zadie was among them, but they made the little boy stay. They didn't even have time to say goodbye. He went with a group of people onto a truck the same way the little Torah did. the same way his father did. And the truck rolled away. Where was he going? Would the little boy see him again? He was left all alone with the remaining workers. And then one day the Nazis were gone. The war was over. The other workers told the little boy he was free to go. But he wasn't going to leave without his little Torah. He had made a promise to his Zadie. The little boy ran to the door of the back room where all the Torahs were stored. But when he opened the door, he was shocked to see everything was gone, including the little Torah. Realizing he would never find his family after the war, the little boy began a long journey to America. But he never forgot the promise he made to his Zadie to find the little Torah. As the little boy grew up, he spent years and years following every lead in search of the little Torah. Many times he felt like he was so close, but each lead met with disappointment. This made the little boy very sad, but he never gave up hope. Then one morning he was in his kitchen reading the paper and saw a story about Torahs from Czechoslovakia, which were collected and carefully restored at the Westminster Synagogue in London. After so many years of searching for the little Torah with no results, he felt like he still had to follow this lead. So he booked a ticket to London. When he finally arrived at the Westminster Synagogue, the little boy was led into a big room. There, in front of him, were more than 1,500 Torahs on wooden racks. It had been so many years since the little boy had worked in a warehouse, numbering the Torahs, and yet these Torahs felt so familiar to him. He imagined that he could even recognize his Zadie's handwriting on the bottoms of the rollers. Overcome with emotion, he stood there, amazed at what he was finally seeing. That number was the one his Zadie had written on the Torah when the little boy's father was taken away. The little boy thought to himself that if this Torah was here, maybe the little Torah could be here too.
Grandpa Arthur, did the little boy finally find the Torah? Isn't that our name?
Yes, Tommy. That is our name. The little boy did find the Torah, and that little boy was me. That day in the Westminster Synagogue, as I searched the shelves, I found the little Torah. I took it off the shelf and was helped to take the worn blue cover off. We unrolled it, and right there, I saw the note my Zadie had written all those years ago. When I saw the note, I couldn't hold back my tears. I stood there crying for a long time. I told the manager of my story, and afterwards she agreed to let me take the little Torah back to America. I wrapped the little Torah in brown paper to protect it. After boarding the plane in London, I buckled the little Torah into the seat next to me. From now on, I whispered before takeoff, we will always take good care of you. But when I got home from London, I couldn't part with the little Torah. It was my Torah that I had found, and being with it felt like being with my Zadie and father again. But Tommy, I am telling you this story now because it is time for me to say goodbye to it. The little Torah needs to be back in the arms of Jewish children. Back in Chicago, I had this new red velvet mantle made for the little Torah.
Grandpa, it still has the number tattooed on it. That's so sad. Shouldn't we take it off?
No, Tommy. The number must stay on. This is how we never forget what happened. How we lost everything but endured and overcame and never gave up hope. This little Torah is the story of our people, tattoos and all. I never got my father or Zadie back, but I got my little Torah back. And I'm forever grateful. And now, children, the little tattooed Torah is yours. May it dwell forever in this house of love and learning. The actual tattooed Torah that this story is based on was permanently loaned to the Solomon Schechter Day School of Metropolitan Chicago in 1972. It still lives there to this day.
Before I invite everyone else up, I want to make sure that I also am not remiss in making sure that I announce all of our very amazing sponsors here in Des Moines for making all of this possible. Temple B'nai Jeshurun, which actually has a Torah that's not tattooed, I discovered, but is from the same area in Czechoslovakia, and also is from the same time period, and it's behind glass at your temple. And then also, obviously, the Women's League of Conservative Judaism here, our branch, which also helped to sponsor and do many things to make sure that everyone could come here tonight. And also, of course, the Jewish Federation of Greater Des Moines, without which we would have not been able to do all of the things that we're doing tonight. So I'm going to invite the director, Mark Bennett, the producer, Lisa Efres, the executive producer, Beth Copeland, and Daniel Alshay, the composer, to come up and to talk to us a little bit more about the film. And I have some open-ended questions, and Bob is going to walk around with a microphone, and if you have questions of your own, and then we'll go from there. So thank you all. I'll sit here. You guys can sit wherever you like. All the chairs are named, but not for you, so you can pick wherever you want to go. Again, thank you all for coming and for the travel and everything you had to do to make sure that you were here tonight. And the first thing I wanted to ask was, how did this project become a movie? Now, you talked a little bit about it in the 6-minute film, but like, how did you all come together to be the people who did it? Because I think that that's something that, I think it seems to me that a film or any production is like a little bit of a family that comes together, and it's a family by choice. But, you never know, like a congregation, different people kind of come in and out, and you don't know when you first begin a project what that's like. So that's the first question I have. I don't know who wants to take it, but also when you have a chance, introduce yourselves so that we can.
Hi, I'm Mark Bennett. I'm the director and co-screenwriter. This is Lisa Efres, our producer. Beth Copeland, our executive producer, whose mother wrote this book 30 years ago. And Daniel Alshay, our composer. I guess I'll just start with that, but I had met Beth when I was doing an art show in Chicago, and she approached me. She had heard that I was also a filmmaker, and she approached me with this book that her mother had done 30 years ago, and she said that she had wanted to make it into an animated film. And I looked at the book and the beautiful illustrations and thought about what she was saying, that I had never really come across anything that taught the lessons of the Holocaust to young children, especially in a palatable and in a manner that was seemed appropriate for such horrific material. And I immediately said on the spot, I will do it, without having any idea how I would do it, because I had never done an animated film before, but I felt pretty sure that this was something I needed to do. And I called one of my friends who was, their foundation funds Holocaust education. They came on board. Next call was the USC Shoah Foundation. They came on board and were going to be responsible for bringing it out to educational distribution around the world. And the next call was Lisa Efres, my good friend for over 30 years, to if she and her company, $11 Bill, would produce it. And then Daniel came on at the little bit after that and brought the music to it, which I still feel is one of Ed Asner and his music and the actual story were the three most exciting things that came together. But it was like a family coming together. The budget was not huge, so it was a labor of love for many of us, but I think we all shared the common feeling that this was really important and needed to be done. And we set out with the goal of getting this thing made and it's seen by as many people around the world as possible. And so far, it's been going great. And coming to a place like this in Des Moines is exciting for us.
And, you know, everybody here that watches it and sees it and goes and tells somebody else all become a part of making sure that this story gets out into the world. Do you want to follow up?
That was wonderful. Thank you so much for having us. I just want to let you all know how much we enjoy being here and truly do appreciate the invitation and the honor. Like Mark said, he called me I remember I was driving home from the airport in Denver, and he called me and he's like, "Can you talk?" And I was like, "Yeah, I've got like a 45-minute drive ahead of me for sure." So he said, "Well, there's this book and she wants to do this film, and I didn't know who to call, so I thought I would call you, and are you in?" And just similar to Mark, I really did not need to think about it for very long. I knew instantly that it was a project that I really wanted to be a part of. At the time, my daughter was about 4.5. I think she was just about to turn 5. And I had never really thought about how we were gonna approach the subject of the Holocaust with her. Like it hadn't come up yet because she was quite young at the time. And when this opportunity presented itself, I was like, that's it. I'm gonna have a film and a book to go with it, and she's the perfect age for this. By the time it was gonna be done, I knew that she'd be at the right age. So it just felt like truly a wonderful opportunity, and then to have us all come together. And I soon met Beth and Brett and brought Daniel on, and we truly did become a family, and it's been a wonderful journey.
First of all, hello, Des Moines. It's really fun to be here. And there is something very special and unique about small Jewish communities. And since I've always grown up in a large Jewish community, I so appreciate all the effort it goes into building a very impactful but small Jewish community. And we're honored to be here. I grew up with the book. My mom wrote it when I was in my 20s. And it wasn't until she was literally on her deathbed that I thought about doing something more. Just to give you a slightly different perspective than what they have already said. I thought maybe we'd just translate it into Hebrew, that would be the end of it, and then it just didn't feel right. And then I started literally having dreams about making a movie. And I finally said to my mom, who's passed on, I said, "Mom, I don't know how to make a movie." And the dreams kept coming, and I finally said, "Fine, I'll do the movie. I just have to figure it out." And the craziest part is my son was finishing Road Tripping, Beth Copeland, who was the co-screenwriter, and he was between Road Tripping and rabbinical school. And I said to him, "You're a creative writer. Write me a screenplay. I need to pitch something to a producer and or a director when I make this film." He's like, "Mom, I've never done a screenplay." I'm like, "Oh, come on, honey. Download a few, figure it out, and we'll rewrite it 100 times over, but I need something to pitch to show that it could be made." And sure enough, 3 days later, he comes on and goes, "Okay, Mom, here's your screenplay." I'm like, "What? I guess we're doing this." And then I started literally sending it out to different producers, and it was just a serendipitous event when I found Mark. And the other magical part, which we haven't really talked about, is that Martin Lemmelman is the original illustrator of the book. He was in his 30s when he did it, and when I called him before I even met Mark, and I said, "Martin, I've got this great idea. First of all, we're going to do it just in Hebrew, the book, before even the film came on as an idea." And then he came on and did the illustrations for the film. So the art is seamless. And that is just a miracle in itself, that now Martin and I are tied with the book and the film through all these decades, 30 years later. And that was not an easy thing. And now Mark was just so kind to mentor Brett in the art of writing a screenplay. And I have to say that I said to Mark, it's not a done deal. If he doesn't prove his worth, he's out, but give him a shot, because I don't think anyone would give the kavod to his bubby the way my son would if I just hired a straight-up screenwriter. And Mark was very patient, and they worked their magic together. And one other thing that I don't know if you're aware of, there's so many teaching moments through this story. So this was the USC Shoah's idea, who's our executive producer. They thought we should make it more of a teaching film. So without being, I don't even know the word condescending, without just being very simple about how they say what a Torah is, what a Kiddush cup is, what a Zaidi is, because we wanted this to become a universal film. and for people that are unaffiliated who are Jewish and or people that are not Jewish. And it certainly seems to have taken legs, and it has gone into many of the non-Jewish communities, and we're thrilled with the educational component. Here, now I'm giving you Daniel.
So, hi, thank you for having us here. It's a wonderful opportunity. I always wanted to come, and I have good friends who grew up here, and they said you should go to Des Moines, so here we are. So I don't know what I can add about the initial production of the film, but just like with Martin, the funny story with Martin is that we waited, I think, another year and a half, because initially there were supposed to be how many illustrations? Like a small number of illustrations, and once they started working on it, they realized they needed about 109 of them, I think, to actually complete this. And it took a very long time, and Martin worked very, very hard for a very long time. And same was with the music. Beth thought, maybe he approached us at a time when we first met, and she was like, maybe you can have a violin or something, maybe a clarinet, something. And the more I saw the images and I saw the parts of the edit came in, I realized, I told Mark, I think this would really benefit from something that can help it bring out all this emotion and depth and the Jewish sound of it, and so I suggested using an orchestra and then suggested using a choir, and we ended up, all of us, Mark and Lisa and I, going together to Russia, to Moscow, and recording it there with the orchestra and the choir, and it was I think a good choice. We wanted to do it in Eastern Europe. I thought it was, first we explored London and doing it in Los Angeles, but then we thought the sound of an Eastern European orchestra and the way they would handle this material would again benefit the tone of everything, and I think it came out really, really nicely.
So how did you guys come to find Ed Asner?
Ed Asner. I had done a film a few years previously with Ed, and we became friends, and I must say that man has got one of the most incredible work ethics I've ever seen in an actor. Super prepared, professional, really took everything serious. And when I signed on and Lisa signed on, it was like, okay, who are we going to get to narrate this? We needed a grandfather. And I thought, wow, what about Ed? Because not only is he Jewish, but he's very philanthropic, involved in a lot of Jewish causes. And I said, all right, let's give it a shot. I mean, it wasn't asking for a favor. We had it in the budget, not a lot, but, it wasn't a Pixar film. But I called Ed, left a message. He called me back in like 10 minutes. And I started pitching him the thing. I said, we're doing a film. It's an animated short. It's based on a renowned children's book that teaches the lessons of the Holocaust to young children. And before I could even finish my sentence, he said, I'm in, I want to do it. And I was like, oh, okay, great. We needed a grandfather. And he goes, who else are you going to get? And he actually was really excited about it. He thought it was a wonderful idea. And when he came in that day to record it, if you do a movie, you learn your lines, you're in front of a camera, you don't have your script. In voiceover, you're sitting in a room with there's no camera, so you could read. He was almost completely off book. He almost had memorized the whole thing. And, directing is an interesting job because you could give people suggestions and lead them a little bit, but with voiceover, it's hard, it's they either get it or they don't. It's really hard to say, emphasize this more, or do this faster or slower. So a lot of times it's all in the person you pick, that they're going to do it justice. And I think his reading of this script is remarkable because he brings such passion. And, I would think that most people are engaged by his cadence and his delivery. And he really elevated the project to another level. So we were very fortunate, and will be always missed and never forgotten. A great man. So we are translating the film with subtitles into 8 languages. We're, because USC Showa is distributing this in classrooms around the world. But we were approached by an organization in the Latin American country to do a Spanish version of it. But they didn't want to do a subtitle, they wanted to do a spoken Spanish version of it. They felt for children that it would be better. Now, of course, that is a much better way to go, but it's the difference between doing it in spoken language and doing a subtitles is tremendous. But they got the funding, we did it, and we went to Ed and asked him if he would be, does he know Spanish, would he be interested in doing it? So he came back he did a test.
Mark made me go to Ed.
All right, I made Lisa because I was a little shy. But we went to Ed, he was so interested in doing it, he went out and got the accent and everything, but the producers in Latin America felt he did a great job, but they wanted somebody authentic. And we ended up getting one of Latin America's top soap opera stars to do it. It was another friend of mine, Fernando Allende, and it's even richer and more dramatic. But Ed...
And then Mark made me tell Ed he didn't get the job.
That's what a producer does.
Wow. So when I have free time, I watch Hawaii Five-0, the new ones, and he was a character. He was a big art heister. So everybody would fence their stuff through him, right? So so this week I watched an episode and he was in it, and so it was also amazing and wonderful to see him in this role as well. But he did the variety of work that Ed Asner had in his oeuvre is just incredible.
He won the Academy Award for he didn't win, but the film. One of the other deciding factors was to go to Ed is because he lent his voice to a film called Up, an animated Pixar film for children mostly. And the character was Ed's voice, but they kind of depicted the animation to represent Ed a little bit, and it won the Academy Award. So I felt that it didn't hurt to have somebody who narrated an Academy Award-winning film to do this.
So kind of off of that, what has the reception been in getting this educational resource into all the different schools that you have? What has that been like, first of all, and then how has USC helped you? I think that's important to know, USC Showa Foundation. And have the schools been from various denominations and religions? And are you in the public school system yet? That was something that we wanted to know. Especially since here in Des Moines, you'll see tomorrow, we have a community Hebrew school. We all work together as in one building, but almost all of our children here, the exception of a few, go to public schools, but across the area. So we're curious to know, and we're obviously a very visible but very small minority in this city.
I guess I'll answer that. That's a very good question, by the way. Bringing USC Showa Foundation, I assume most of you know, it's the USC Showa Foundation is the foundation that Steven Spielberg started after Schindler's List, which was dedicated to capturing the testimony of all living Holocaust survivors. At the time in 1993 or 4, there were about 350,000 in the world. To date, they have done over 55,000 and growing. And not only have they captured the testimonies, but also have started doing them, a limited number of them, in hologram technology with voice interaction. So you see a hologram of a survivor on stage and you can actually ask him a question. It's pretty remarkable. But getting USC Showa on board was was a tremendous coup for us because it opened up the getting this film out to classrooms all around the world. USC Shoah Foundation has a website called Eyewitness, which is all about fighting hatred, not only anti-Semitism. USC Shoah Foundation, since its inception, has grown to cover other genocides as well. To date, we have the film and the trailer and an educational program developed just for the film, around the film, is online on the Eyewitness website, which I could provide you, for schools, classrooms, teachers around the world for free, in perpetuity. And shortly, the Spanish version is up with Portuguese subtitles, because we did it in Brazil, and soon it'll be in 8 subtitled versions as well, and that is going out to classrooms around the world. To give you an example, last year during Holocaust Remembrance Day, this year, it was earlier this year, yeah, Holocaust Remembrance Day, USC Shoah did a test in Toronto, and they put out an email telling about the movie and the curriculum, and the curriculum is really pretty brilliant because it's all based around what's precious to you. You got to remember that 90% of the students that see these things are not Jewish. So the exercise begins before the movie, dealing with the students and what is precious to them. And a lot of them is like my iPad, my bicycle, my this, my that, possessions. After they watch the movie, they have another exercise about what's precious to you. And it's so interesting that there's a monumental shift in the answers to things like family photos, family events, family get-togethers, or special moments with relatives. So they really are starting to see that there's some emotional connection that students are making with this film, even that are not Jewish. And additionally, it's also introducing a lot of non-Jewish children to Jewish traditions and like things like the Torah that are sacred. But the whole idea was that when something sacred is desecrated or taken away from you, that is wrong. And it becomes a universal message, not just a Jewish one. Anyway, getting back to Holocaust Remembrance Day, they put it out this message to all the teachers and schools, not knowing how many people would pick it up at all. To their amazement, 17,000 teachers picked up the email. What's that? Across Canada. No, just Toronto, actually. Yeah, Toronto. It's Toronto and the surrounding areas. And downloaded the program and used it for educational purposes for that day. And in that week, 17,000 teachers, about 35 to 40 students per class, they estimated that almost 400,000 students in that area were exposed to the film, and the reviews just gave us chills because it was all about, it was working, and people were getting it, and the conversation had begun. And we just got word about 2 weeks ago that it was so successful that the Canadian educational body, well, I'm not sure what it's called, has decided this next year they're going to put it out to the whole country of Canada. So that could be in the millions of kids. So it's kind of, our goal, like as I said before, was we wanted to get this out to as many people around the world as possible. And when you hear things like that, you realize that we're on our way to achieving that.
I just want to add, because you asked a question about public schools and non-denominational. My daughter is currently in 5th grade. Last year she was in 4th grade. And I love to post on Facebook and Instagram just so that my friends and family who don't live I live in Boulder, Colorado, who aren't in the area, they kind of know what we're up to. I know what they're up to. So I had done a lot of posting about the Tattooed Torah because we had recently won a couple of awards and we were shortlisted for AICP and all kinds of things. So my daughter's teacher at the time in 4th grade emailed me and she's like, I saw your post about the Tattooed Torah. Like, what is this? Is it appropriate for 4th graders? How can I watch the film? Tell me a little bit more about it. So it's not a it's not a public school. It is a private school, but it's non-denominational. And so I sent her the trailer and the film and a ton of information about it. And she wrote me back that night. She has 3 kids of her own. She said they all watched it. She was crying. She thought it was absolutely beautiful, and she wanted to show it to the school. So it went to my daughter's school, and they all, most of the grades, I think the upper level kids didn't watch it, but the younger grades did, and it got a really good reception there as well. I think the kids were super engaged. And the question is always like, how young can it go? Like what is the target age or the youngest age? And I think it's really hard to say. I think it depends on the child. I think it depends on the educators and the parents knowing those kids. But we've gone as young as the first time my daughter saw it, she was like 6. But now, as she got older, she continued to watch it. But I think it just depends. Anything to add?
There's always more to add. Please do. Well, I want to go back to Ed for a second, because there's so much about the man that is just so interesting and rich. And just from a magic point of view, when Ed breathed life into the script for the first time, my reaction was, I went into the corner, curled up in a ball and sobbed. And Brad, who's a giggler, went into the corner and silently giggled, because it was such a powerful emotion that we didn't know how to contain it. And what was so interesting about Ed is that when he walked in, he had a cane, and he was a little hunched over. I'm like, oh, I hope he's okay. I hope he's up to the challenge. He sat down in the booth. He was a complete professional, and something came over him, and he rocked it. And what was so wonderful about Ed is that he asked us what emotions we were going for, how to pronounce certain words. And he would actually, a couple times, if he didn't like the way it was written, as a group, we would collaborate and just say, okay, let's see if we can adjust it slightly, because it didn't flow the way he wanted it to flow. And it was just an amazing, amazing honor. And it was one of the highlights of my life, just working with this unbelievable man for the day. And it was the only time I spent with him, and it seared into my heart forever. So we did have dinner. No, the whole day. Yeah, no, we had the half day, and then we went to dinner, and he was just funny, and he was flirty, and he was snarky, and he was brilliant, and he's exactly who you think he is. I mean, that's just who he is. It was just amazing. But as far as going global, besides the non-Jewish, what you consider like in the US and the Canadas and the North Americas, is that with all these subtitles, we've already sent the link out to communities in Russia and Hungary and Poland. I had the honor and benefit of going to Czechoslovakia, Czech Republic, while we were filming the film, because I wanted to learn more about it. So we went to Brno, where our Torah came from. We met with the rabbi. We went to the community. Talk about small Jewish communities. It was amazing to be in Brno, and then go to Prague. And in the church where our Torah was actually stored, which, if any of you would like to buy the book, I have it. And the book is actually the real story, and the movie became historical fiction. We added a little bit more, and Mark will tell you more about that. But we met with the minister, where it was a synagogue, became a church that actually housed our Torah. And what touched me profoundly is that when I showed her our book, she hadn't heard about it, and her church was mentioned in the book. And she shared the book with her congregation, and she said now her congregation, she shared the story with them, and they were so touched by it, they are now praying on behalf of the Jewish people and the state of Israel. And I was so touched by that. And these little pebbles, as we put them out and throughout the huge pond in the world, it's having its effects. And our hope and dream is that if you get people at a young age, 6, 8, 10, before they start to form all their horrible biases and prejudices, and you start the conversation when they're little, like, oh, just because you don't look like me and just because you may believe slightly differently than I do, I don't like you or I'm going to hurt you. It doesn't make sense. So if you have these conversations when they're little, before it's too late, that's part of our whole intention.
One other thing about the age appropriateness is a good point, Lisa. But it was interesting because USC Showa told us that most of the programs they do for children are geared towards 5th, 6th, 7th grade. But with the Tattooed Torah, they found teachers using it in 1st and 2nd grade, as young as 1st and 2nd grade. So I think that was a great testament to the broad range of it. But I think it's, you know, I don't have any children myself, but I think from all the things we've heard and all the reactions from teachers is that it's actually not inappropriate to start at that age.
Thank you. I have one more question before we open it up to the floor, and Bob will go around with a mic. And part of this was, so I'm a big fan of music. People in the congregation know this. People in the Jewish community know this. And I was curious we were curious about the inspiration for the music. You know, you talked a little bit about making sure that you wanted an Eastern European orchestra and choir, but if you could talk a little bit more about that, that would be really great.
Perfect.
Sure. I don't know. We didn't really borrow anything. I think that we had some discussions about some Jewish songs and things in Yiddish that we were talking about. I was talking to Brett about some things, but at the end of the day, we just I just approached it like a film, like we score films, and basically just went scene by scene. There were some key scenes that I honed in on initially, and it just somehow grows from there. There was no the emotional power of the visuals and the story, and Ed's narration was so easy and powerful to work with that it just, you know, these things just somehow flow. I can't tell you that there was something special thematically, but it was woven. It just gets woven pretty naturally. While after, when I was talking to Beth, as we were screening it, and we the last screening that we were in, that was a live screening like this one, was actually like the weekend before the pandemic started. We were in Evanston, in Illinois, and screened it, and went on the plane back, landed in LA, and from that point on, everything shut down. And most of our screenings, all of them, I think, were online on Zoom and all over the world. We had one in Israel, we had one, different ones, and in the UK, And so I had, as we screened it more and more, I had this idea that it'd be wonderful, because it was all about giving, using this material and having it go as far as it can. And I said to Beth, it would be wonderful, since we have a book and we have a film. I think it would really work, because of Ed's narration, it would really work as a book on tape. And so if you search, there is actually on YouTube and all the streaming services. We just got that, it came out last week. It took a little while to get it out, but there's a version where you can just, if someone can't see the film, they can just listen to it, and it's basically just the music with Ed's narration. And you can, if you want to experience his voice without being biased by the picture, you can see how powerful it is, because it's really, really impactful.
I'm going to ask you a question, because I found this endlessly fascinating. Can you talk about the day in the studio?
The day.
And maybe for you it's routine, but for me it was mind-blowing.
In Russia?
In Russia.
Okay.
Like, hello, I think this is so cool.
So I used to have a type of assistant who was an orchestrator and who worked in Los Angeles. He was Russian, and he used to orchestrate for me and do some work on my scores, and he left. He had to leave because I think it was because of papers, and he went back to Russia, and we stayed in touch. And he's a very, very talented musician, and he started this service that basically gives orchestra services, recording services for Hollywood. Because he was in touch with a lot of the composers in town, he was able to continue being in touch with them. I stayed in touch with him, and he started this whole orchestral service. So basically, people either do it remotely or come there and can record Hollywood scores, because recording in London and in Los Angeles is extremely expensive. In Los Angeles, it's due to union issues. And in London, there are no union issues, but it's just a lot more expensive. And in Eastern Europe, there are a lot of these services that we end up using and recording live orchestras and choirs and soloists. And so I was in touch with him, and when we were going through budgets, I already piqued Mark's interest with a bigger orchestra and a choir. We tried to make it work and financially, and I said, I think it would be wonderful to record with this guy, because we also would get the royal treatment in Russia if we came, and so we all flew there, and he's a wonderful guy, and yeah. So if you don't know how a session, what's called session orchestras work, these musicians, you don't pay them for rehearsals. This is not like the LA Philharmonic or the New York Philharmonic, where they have rehearsals, they get the parts, they know this is not a famous piece of music, so they basically get the notes, we put them on the stand, and they play it and record it. And so you go through it once or twice, and basically it gets recorded. So this is the level of musicians that we're talking about. The sight reading, which is basically reading the music off the stand immediately. First time they ever saw it, gets gelled together. They're used to playing together, and yeah. How many takes? Well, we probably could do 3 takes or something like that. 3, 4 takes, yeah, of each. How many microphones? That's the detailed questions here. How many microphones? Well, mostly you have what's called a decatry, which is a set of multiple mics that are above the orchestra, and then you have some far mics that are farther away that record more of the ambience of the room, and then what's called spot mics, which are either soloists, and they're very close mics on each of the either sections, which is either string sections, wind sections, brass sections. The choir itself was recorded separately in that room. In the intermission between the sessions, we got the choir to record separately, and many microphones. I don't know, probably 60 mics, probably something like.
One of the reasons my mind was blown. I'm like, what do you mean? Like Mark's like, oh, I think I want a little more harp. I'm like, well, how do you do that? He goes, well, we tone everything else down and we pull up the harp. I'm like, oh, that's so brilliant and that's so obvious. But like, as being a newbie to all this, I had no idea. But one thing I wanted to say is, these 3 people are rock stars, and you're in the presence of genius, and they're so humble. And what was so amazing is that everybody put their ego aside because they're so outstanding. And I could speak for an hour on each one of these guys and all the details and all the magic they put in and the post-production. And I could cry. It's just so unbelievable. And I just want you to know that it's always even an honor for me to be in their presence.
I can add a couple words. Writing for orchestra, especially for film, is a lengthy process. It has to go through a lot of editing, changes in the movie. So there's assistants that help with that, and then of course there's an orchestrator that helps the composer because there's so much music to cover, so much writing to do. We can't orchestrate everything ourselves, so we do some sort of a minimal sketch that's orchestral, and then we get help from an orchestrator. And then there are people who print the notes for the orchestra, and then there's the person who records, so there are engineers involved, and then there's a person that mixes it afterwards, more people involved. So, and the conducting, of course, is part of it, so I conducted the orchestra. So this is a there are a lot of very hard-working, very time-consuming processes of getting something like this done, and so all of these people were just so wonderful, and that's why it sounds this way, and we really got a big bunch of talented people working on this, and yeah.
Okay, I just have 2 quick things to add. The first is that Daniel and I had worked together prior to the Tattooed Torah, so we had already had a relationship established. I think there was a lot of trust there and open lines of communication. And when I reached out to him about this project, I said, I just want to be super upfront with you. This is the money that I have. It's a low budget film, a very low budget film, and this is the money I've got. So are you in? It's okay if you're not in. I completely understand if this is just not, something that you want to jump into. And he was like, no, I'm in. And then when Russia came up, I was like, Daniel, remember how much money we have? I'm like, what's it going to cost? He's like, don't worry about it. He's like, I got it figured out. We're good. And I was like, okay. And again, I think as a producer, it's just so important to have those relationships where you really do trust the team that's around you. And I just trusted Daniel. He's like, we're going to Russia. And I was like, okay. Like, I had never heard of the Bowtie Orchestra before. I had no idea what to expect. And I trusted him. And it turned out to be, I think, one of the best decisions we made around this whole project. My second thing, and I'll be quick, is I do want to mention back to just the age appropriateness and the education in the kids in the schools. I think our goal for the film was always to stay true to the book and to Martin's original illustrations. And when you think about kids these days, they're used to like Pixar movies with amazing 3D animation and just, you know, that's the kind of stuff that really catches their attention. And I know because I have a 10-and-a-half-year-old. And so we were, I don't want to call it a struggle, but we were really kind of trying to figure out like what level of animation could we do that would still be engaging to the kids, but still really stay true to the original illustrations. And so when you look at the film, the animation, well, we love it and are so proud of it. It is pretty simple in terms of the degree of animation that there is. But again, our goal has always been to just really stay true to the book, and I think the animation did a good job of that.
Thank you. So I don't know if anybody has any questions, and Bob's got a mic ready to run, like Donahue, right? So we'll start with Mike Cooperman. The mic's already on, just so you know.
Everything was so positive, I almost hate to ask the question, but I just wonder, have you gotten any negative feedback about this? And are there parents that say, don't teach Holocaust, it never happened, or any of that type of baloney?
Yeah, so I'll repeat it. So Mike asked, have you gotten any negative feedback, either in the schools or anything like that, and then also like parents or teachers who say like we shouldn't teach the Holocaust and all those kinds of things, or Holocaust denial, which has been in the news lately.
I never had anyone say no because of Holocaust denial, but it's interesting as different countries have different cultures. So when we tried to show it in Israel, there was some pushback because, and also in Eastern Europe, there was a little pushback because we were trying to make sure it was light enough so it didn't offend and didn't horrify the American families and the young children. But for people that live Holocaust every day, Eastern Europe and in Israel, they thought it was too light in some communities. So you can't please everybody, but still everyone appreciated the fact that a grandparent could now sit down and watch the film with a 5-year-old. And there's still some grandparents that still struggle with how to bring up the topic. So that was my mom's whole concept, is like, oh, well, if I read the book and then the 6-year-old starts to ask more questions about it, it just opens the dialogue. And that was the whole intent. Got a little pushback from Yad Vashem in Israel. I showed the film to the head educator there. Again, they're the expert in Holocaust education, and anything that they don't produce, there was a little bit pushback. But every other museum in the world loves the film. It's funny.
And we did have some pushback, not from the film, but the title in Israel. When we went to get it translated, there was some astonishment that we wanted to say Torah and tattoo in the same sentence. And my credit I give to Beth on this because she stayed true to her mother's vision, not only the alliteration of the Tattooed Torah, but the whole movie, the significance of that juxtaposition of something sacred and something horrific is the whole purpose of the movie. So instead of caving to the translators in Israel, we stayed true to it because the numbered tattoo was not what this movie is about. It's about the tattooed Torah. So I give credit to Beth for standing true to her mother's vision of doing this in a palatable way, but also in a very firm statement of the atrocities that this movie represents, but in the way it was done in such a palatable way. We don't show people being murdered. We don't show people in the gas chambers. It's meant to be to open up an initial conversation of a topic that should never, ever, ever be swept under the rug.
Thank you. And thank you, Mike. Yeah, Sue.
So I'm wondering, well, two things. One, if you could spell out the website address, and two, if we sent that to parents that we know, individuals that we know who have children, whether or not they're Jewish, if those adults would be able to go on and easily see how to introduce the film to their kids and have a conversation.
Well, I don't have the website for USC Show offhand, but I'll give that to the rabbi. It's very easy. There's a page there that has the trailer, the movie, the educational curriculum, and our website, the general website for all the information and the trailer, and it's and the video you saw tonight is basically just thetattooedtorah.com. Very easy to navigate, and there's quite a lot of information there and everything, and we'll get that other website to you.
And we'll put it in the email so that everybody can have it and they can share it with their families and friends. The other thing I wanted to say is that the Federation and the Temple and we are sponsoring a film festival for Hanukkah that's going to have a lot of films. I think it's like 11 films or something like that over the course of the 8 days of Hanukkah. If you sign up for your family, then you get to be able to see all the films the whole entire time. And we have limited registration, so you should do it when the information comes out. But one of the films is actually the Tattooed Torah, so you can also see it again through that film festival, and you can just go online and see it as well. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Elisa's mother.
Oh.
And actually, I drove here today from the Twin Cities with my granddaughter for the sole purpose of being here tonight and watching her in action, because I've never seen her do what she did tonight. And I just want you to know, number one, I'm going to get to the real point, but I just wanted you to know how proud I am of you. And Mark, I've known Mark for 30 years or more, and he's just one terrific guy. And I also wanted to mention that Jody is my cousin. So I thank Jody for being able to put this together. My real question or comment is for Lise. And I just wanted you to tell everybody tonight there was one other voiceover in the movie. And I just wanted you to let them know who it was, because I'm really proud of him too.
Yep, that's my mom over there. Typical Jewish mother. No, the little boy in the movie is my nephew, Abe Efris, her grandson.
And he did a wonderful job because he was a secondary person, because the boy we originally were having do it which was our other executive producer, Melinda Goldrich, whose foundation was the main funder of this. Her sister's child, nephew, was going to do the voice. And when we had talked to him about it, he had a young child's voice. And 4 years later, when we went to record it finally, all of a sudden he went from somebody who talked like this to somebody who talked like this. And we were like, oh my God, we can't use this kid. He sounds like he's 30 years old. So I had he was, he totally understood, and the family understood. It was no big deal. But Lisa's nephew, who's Abe, was perfect, and he did a great job. And it's just, filmmaking takes a long time. And I'll just say one thing, because I think I find it interesting, and maybe you will. But anybody here, you may have not done a movie before, but anything you've ever done in life that's collaborative, that involves the unison and work of a group of people all towards a similar goal. And that is one of the most exciting things for me and most of us. What's exciting about filmmaking is that it's a truly collaborative process. And, to have somebody like you guys mentioned, Ed, coming and bringing his talent, or Daniel, coming up with this idea that we should have an orchestra, 60-piece orchestra and a 30-piece choir. And that's what's so exciting, is that it's really, it's this group community that all lends its talents, ideas, and everybody listens to everybody, and jointly you figure out your way. For me, I've directed many films before, but never an animation. So yes, when I went to the animator, I thought 10, 15 illustrations, not 110. The guy nearly had a heart attack. But it's a really exciting process. And so when I describe it to people who have not done a film before, I just say, just think of anything that's collaborative. And it's a really exciting process. So to be here tonight after traveling around the world showing this thing and getting people involved and seeing people react to it in the way they've done, it's really exciting, especially when the goal is to get such an important message out there that we really feel is needed in today's world more than ever. So we really thank you all for being here. Really appreciate it.
Well, we thank you very much for making the trip. Looks like we have another question.
This question probably isn't fair to you because it's not about the production of this wonderful film. But does anybody know why? What was the intent of the Nazis requiring the tattooing of all the Torahs and recording where they came from?
This one probably goes.
All right. When I was in Prague, I'm a great networker, and I was able to, we got invited into the Israeli ambassador's home to the Czech Republic. And when we were there, it was a very, very special morning. He had invited the head curator of the Jewish Museum in Prague. So she gave me the history, and apparently there were some very influential Jews back when the Nazis were starting to come into power, and they somehow convinced some of the higher-up Nazi officials that it would be very interesting if, after we were all gone, that they would make a museum. So they did it only, to her knowledge, in the Czech Republic. There are other Torahs that were found and hidden throughout Europe, but it's because of this, the irony is, we know where the Torahs are from because of the Nazis were so meticulous with the cataloging. We have the largest Jewish collection in all of Europe in Prague because of that. And there's 1,564, and if anyone wants to, I think all but 1,300 of them are dispersed throughout the world, and I understand your community has one, or I'm not sure if it's actually part of the Czech scrolls. And I know some of you are Ramah people. I know that I think every Ramah camp has one. Our synagogue has one. The thing that is so important to remember is that each Torah represented a community. And that one Torah then was touched by thousands of people over decades, collected, and now that they're out throughout the world, they're having the same impact again. They're powerful, powerful tools for teaching. And we're so proud because this was barely a known story for decades, and I think it's one of, if you can say, one of the coolest stories that came out of the Holocaust.
Doesn't it go back to the Nazis wanting to brag about it?
They wanted to brag about it. They wanted to show who we were, how we destroyed, and how much, yeah. Well, they also did awful things too. I mean, they desecrated also, and they were very proud of that too. They were going to show everything, how they
were going to make a museum.
Right.
With all the artifacts.
Make a museum, and unfortunately, they did some horrible things also to the Torahs too. They were just crazy. It's hard to quantify crazy. We still don't even understand it all.
Hi there. Just a quick question: did Ed Asner have a chance to view the film before he passed away?
Yeah. We screened it. He saw it, of course, and we also screened it with him. So we had some virtual screenings where he attended.
I think the one we did in June was his last.
Right.
Can you say that on the mic?
Yeah, we had a June screening, and he was with us. He attended on Zoom, and that was probably his last public appearance. Yeah. Yep.
Yep.
Not only was Ed on one of our last Zoom screenings, but he was also on one of the first. And that man, for 90 years old, was one of the feistiest, like just loving life, but feisty as hell. It's actually on our website. At the very bottom of the homepage, there's a link to the Miami Jewish Film Festival. And Ed was one of the guests on it. And he... If you watch it, it's pretty interesting. And oh no, I'm sorry, it's not the Miami, it's the LA Jewish Film Festival. It's one of the first, and you'll see how spunky and spirited he was during that.
I just have to add a quick thing about Ed. When we went to go work with him in the studio, we spent the whole day with him and dinner, and we got to know each other. We were talking and learning about where everybody was from. Turns out he was from Kansas City, and his father was a junk man. He was in the scrap metal business. And I was like, oh my gosh, my dad and my grandpa were in the scrap metal business. So he started calling me daughter of a junk man, and I started calling him son of a junk man. So we would do all these Zoom screenings and just continue to get to know each other and whatever. And then the one that we had in June happened to be for my community in Boulder, Colorado, Boulder, Denver. And we had a big turnout. I think there was like 220 people or something. And my friends from Minneapolis were on the line, my brother, my dad, everybody was on. And at the very end of it, he said something like, oh, you're just a daughter of a junk man. And then like the Zoom shut off. And everybody was like, and it was recorded. And my friends were all like, oh my God, that was so mean. Like, why did he say that? And it was funny because I was like, Ed and I have this inside joke and nobody knows about it except Ed and I. And it's like one of those things, now that he's gone, like it's so precious to me, but no one understood it at the time, but I got it.
All right, I have a question. I have two questions for you, Beth. Question number one, can you talk a little bit about what it was like to take a book that your mom had written and write the script with your son? That's the first part of the question. The second question is, what do you think your mom would think about the work that you have done and the way it spread the story and the power of it?
Don't cry.
I don't even know how to start. Working with your adult child is mind-blowing. I'm a big meditator, and there were many, many times that I had to go in the corner and just meditate, saying, Mom, I hope that your intentions are coming through in this script, because we were nervous. And we really, really, really tried hard to keep to the core of the story. But as we deviated, even slightly, I was like, oh my God, I hope that we're not getting away too far from the core of it. But you saw some of those photos in the end credits. That was my mom and my son. And my son actually, at Salman Schechter, we're very proud because we teach our kids from the age of 5 the Hebrew alphabet. So by the time they're 8, they're already reading from the Torah. And they have a ceremony when they're 8 where they have their aliyah for the first time, when they get called up to the Torah and they say their prayer and they actually read a couple sentences from the Torah. They use the Tattooed Torah for that. And my son was always, now he's a rabbi, and my son was always a huge, huge fan of the Torah. So the fact that my mom, obviously when he was little, the book had already been around. He had heard about it, but he and my mom used to collaborate, and they would edit each other's papers. He was 8, and she was, 50-something at the point, 60-something, and they would edit each other's papers. And he's so proud. He thinks that he actually worked on a project with my mother, manifesting her intentions. But it was very powerful, and we had many, many, many conversations of stay true to the core. You do this with love. We take the ego out and try to figure out what the intention was. And it was my mother's whole intention as an educator. She was, and I may have said this, I don't remember, but she was the director of early childhood education at the Board of Jewish Education for 30 years. So her whole focus was, let's teach them at the age of 4 so that when they go home, when they say, Mommy, I want to do Shabbat dinner, or I want to learn more about the Torah, and let's say Mom and Dad aren't that interested in Judaism at that point, then they have to then go learn about it. And her whole idea was, well, if we teach them when they're young, they'll bring Judaism into the family. And it was crazy powerful. I cried my eyes out. What can I tell you? It was, and they all feel like, I feel in many ways that they all got it. We all are affected by the Holocaust in some way. We all have family members that were, somehow related to us, and or we know of people that were affected by it. And it's really became just a family project. But
when we screen this, often we have Holocaust survivors, and we just did a screening last week in Irvine, in California, and there was a group of Holocaust survivors, and they come to us afterwards. They ask questions. It's a very powerful thing. And my mother is a survivor. I grew up in Israel, and so I think there's a lot of depth. I think that, between all of us, a friendship got built, and I guess the testimony to that is the fact that we are working on another film now. Same subject matter in a way, but a feature documentary, and hopefully we can bring it and not for kids, but hopefully we can bring it in a year or two and screen it here as well. But it was absolutely wonderful, a wonderful team to work with. And
I was fortunate enough to see this film during the Women's League conference on Zoom last spring. And I have been talking about it ever since, haven't I? It's just, it's so powerful, and it's such a good teaching tool. And then when Jody said that she and Bob were working on it, and that her cousin was the producer, I'm going, oh my goodness. And I'm so glad that you're here, and I'm so glad that part of the community got to see it, and I know that a lot more will, because I know everybody's going to go home and talk about this. So thank you for being in Des Moines, Iowa.
I want to let everybody know too that they'll be at the school tomorrow to present to the kids at Beit Sefer Shalom out at Casp Terrace. So I think, unless that's it, I want to say thank you to all of you. Thank you for coming all this way. It's not easy to make the trip to Des Moines. It's usually a couple of flights and some other kinds of things. And I want to let everybody else know that there are books available for sale outside with Beth, right at this table, right at the center, where we usually put prayer books and stuff. And then there's also the Women's League Judaica shop will be open if people want to buy anything for that, and latkes are for sale, and I'm trying to remember if there's anything else. Oh, and there's a library, the library's withdrawals from the library are also for sale. And the library has copies of the book as well. We don't have copies of the new book, but we have copies of the original book. So with that, my friends, I hope you have a safe trip home. And once again, thank you so much for coming. And thank you to Jody Jacqueline in particular for making sure this happened. And thanks to Bob, and thanks to Alex, our tech person. And thank you all, and have a safe trip home.